Hey there. You guys having a good day so far? Yeah, awesome. Big room. Everyone made it to the keynote, I'm sure. Lots of exciting news happening for Epic Games. Thanks, first of all, for everyone joining us at Unreal Fest. These events are, well, they're awesome. They're awesome to be at. They're awesome, I'm sure, for you guys to be at also. We just love doing them. My name's Daryl Bear. I do technical marketing for Epic, so I primarily use the editor, but I do Twinmotion. I also do some stuff with MetaHuman and reality capture, reality scan, basically the whole ecosystem of tools. But primarily, I'm using UE the majority of the time. And I'm coming from the background of 3D, right? Like I was a 3D artist for a very, very long time using Maya and Max, Blender, stuff like that, and motion builder, a lot of motion builder work, as well as compositing. So traditional kind of film and TV background, and then started using real time almost 9 years ago, 10 years ago, and haven't looked back. Still use some DCC tools, but I do say that I think Unreal is a little more, I find them frustrating, honestly, when I go back into them. But UE is my best friend now, and I'm going to be showing you some stuff that I've been working on. So it's basically just sharing with you a project of some of the things that are new in 5.7. This was done in build. This is actually a build before Preview 1. Preview 1 comes out today, or actually Preview comes out today. So this is not everything that's in 5.7's in Preview 1, or the first preview, just so you know. Some of the things that we announced at the keynote and some of the things that we're going to maybe talk about today aren't necessarily in the first preview, but they will be in 5.7, and I'll kind of talk about that. A lot of what I'm going to be showing is experimental. Some of it are tools that we've been talking about over several releases that have been progressing and maturing, going from experimental into beta or even into production ready. And if you keep an eye on what we're doing, I mean, we move pretty quickly. We try to really give the tools, or we get them out really early, right? And then we start to let them mature underneath and come into the beauty that they were envisioned as. And a lot of those tools are really starting to do that. And we'll look at a few of those today. It's a pretty, there's only 3 slides, right? Like this is going to be all in the editor. It's very live, so hopefully it all goes well. It should. I think it's been relatively stable for me, so I'm confident that it should just work. We're going to be looking at foliage, talking about trees and sort of the way we're approaching that now and how that helps basically make them work at a performant level as well as fit into a memory footprint and on disk be something that's actually manageable and usable for vast, massive forests and things like that. So we'll talk about how we're approaching foliage, and we'll look at that in depth. We'll talk about some in-render enhancements. The renderer is obviously something Epic puts a ton of effort into, right? So every release we get up and we say, hey, we've made it faster. Well, that's true, we have. Like every release algorithmically, we do things that we find improvements, we get better with threading, the async stuff gets better, and that continues with 5.7. We're making really big strides, and we're also introducing new things like the fast geometry streaming and all these things that kind of lead toward getting UE to do things that are very performant, regardless of the platform that you're running on. I'm actually running this on a laptop today, which is, well, there's several reasons, but mainly because the build is on this laptop and it works. So we're running on this laptop today, which is testament to the engine that we can actually demo work on a laptop and actually be totally productive with it. We'll talk about MegaLights and Substrate. So MegaLights was introduced a couple releases ago. We've made some nice improvements to them in 5.6 and 5.7. Those improvements continue with new support for multiple things that it didn't used to be able to handle. So we've added some functionality as well as just overall performance. We've added some tools that allow you to tweak the lights and really kind of get an understanding of what they're doing. So there's both improvements in the way that they work, as well as the usability aspect of it that sits on top of it. Substrate, we're going to look a little bit at Substrate. We'll talk about PCG just for a fun little second. There's lots of PCG presentations here, so definitely make sure and check those out. The big item on PCG is it's now production ready. So my scene has PCG in it in several different areas. I'll kind of just mention where they are. We can pull the graph up really quickly if you want. I will be on the demo pods for the whole today after this event. After this session, I'll be on the demo pod as well as all day tomorrow. So if you guys want to kick the tires on the file or really go check it out, just come talk to me. And we won't have a lot of time for Q&A at the end, but those demo pods are a great place to come ask questions. And a lot of the engineers that work on the codes are also hanging out on those demo pods. So it's a cool place to be, to come check out. Final thing that we're going to talk about is animation. And again, 5.6 was a really, really big release for animation. We've continued to make some slight improvements. I mean, 5.6 was just like, it was a blip ago. Like it was 2-3 months ago, right? So the things that we've done for 5.7 are really pretty fun. A lot of these are like the local motion system. There's just a few key things that the local motion system actually addressed and fixed more or less in 5.7 that makes it much, much more usable. And we'll look at a fun example of that. So that's what we're going to be doing in the next 35 minutes. So we're going to be flying through this, and hopefully it makes sense to you all. So the first stuff that we're going to talk about is rendering. All right, so we talked about MegaLights, and actually it doesn't look like MegaLights are happening right now, but trust me, MegaLights are happening right now. Those drones, it's a nanite particle system. So it's a Niagara system with nanite meshes on it. So nanite's rendering the meshes. And then on each one of those little guys is actually 3 lights right now. They're on, but because they're supposed to be bright during the night, they're not going to show up in the intensity of the sun. I have the sun at a kind of physical value here. So we're actually looking at, there's 100 drones. There's 2 spotlights and 1 point light. So there's 300 lights on the drones, and then like, I don't know, 5 or 6 other lights kind of scattered around the scene. The lighting model for this is really basic. It's just sun sky system, physical, some volumetric fog, some local volumes kind of scattered around a few places, and then obviously like the directional light and the skylight, like in the, that's really all that's going on. And then there's some lights on the robots. So here's the thing. If we take this and we just, we hide the sun, and it's going to take a second for it to catch up. Like it has to do, Lumen has to do its thing, and we leave that night volume on. In theory, this is going to, at some point, start to come together and look pretty cool. Have you guys, did everybody play with that Celestial plugin that came out in 5.6? We released a really cool, like we had the day sky system. That was a plugin that we released relatively recently, but we have this new Celestial plugin also that came out in 5.6. It has like the Milky Way in the background and stars, and you can put planets in it, and you set time of day and things like that. So that's how I'm actually getting that Milky Way and the stars in the background, is I'm using this. You can see as I move through the time here, it kind of wipes through that guy. So now you can start to see MegaLights doing their thing. And I've got like some fun cameras in here that kind of show the effects. Oh yeah, there's more lights on the ship too. So maybe there's another 20 lights scattered around on that aircraft carrier, sci-fi aircraft carrier. It started off as the Ronald Reagan, the top of it, but then I kit-bashed on top of it and made it look like it should be with these robots. So this is MegaLights, right? So what we've got here is we've got these drones are coming through. They, I actually took the light to overdrive the effect, and I turned off the inversion on it, so they don't have decay on them, so that they hit that back wall. But the end effect is actually pretty cool, and it looks better on this screen than it did in the keynote, because that LED screen had 0 contrast for some reason. So I designed a dark scene, and then we put it on an LED wall that has like 0 contrast. So it didn't really work out there, but it looks better here, which makes me pretty happy. So I've also got a sequence of this. If we just pull up the sequencer here, one of the things that MegaLights does better now is it works with translucency better now, as well as groom. So I've got a MetaHuman inside here, and if we just kind of run this playback, you can see we also have really nice translucent surface on the back of the ship there, and we just have these guys, and it's just a simple little like Boyd swarmy thing. They kind of follow a curve, and then when they get to the end of the curve, they have a vortex thing that kind of pulls them around. And the end result is, hundreds and hundreds of lights swirling around my scene. This guy's motion capture is really funny. So I have all this motion capture of aircraft carrier people. I don't know if you guys ever watch people shoot planes off the aircraft carriers, but they do ridiculous things. Those guys are maniacs, right? So I did a whole bunch of motion capture of like basically actors acting like these aircraft carrier guys. So he's like super excited. That's to crank up the motors, like when they fire the motors on. That's what that movement is. But I was like, hey, that's like he's happy about drones or something. I don't know. It's kind of funny. And then he's like pumped at the end. And those are just multiple clips, honestly, that I just strung together. I actually edited all that together in Sequencer to extend that walk cycle, and I extended the arm thing a couple of times just to make that animation fit into the timing. But that's MegaLights, and that's the main improvements for 5.7. It's moving forward, so it's moved into beta. They do better with translucency, and they do better with grooms, and they do better with moving. Obviously, this is a lot of lights that are moving. There's lots of movement in there, and it's still holding up pretty well. So while we're talking about rendering, we're going to keep on this tip, and I'm actually going to get out of the night scene So we'll go back to the sun. So the moonlight's still on. It's still in there, right? But it's just so dim. It's, it doesn't really show up. And we'll get rid of that fog, the night fog, and we'll just go to like a slightly less intense amount of volume fog there for the day. All right. So here we are in our scene. I'm still doing his thing, and I got this little robot over here doing his thing. Woohoo! Look at that. So fun. So Substrate. I'm using Substrate in this scene, and Substrate is on by default now. That's the big takeaway for 5.7 is Substrate is production ready. It's on by default, and I'm using Substrate in a couple on the material on this main craft here, as well as the back of this guy. And I think I had a bookmark for that. Yeah, I do. All right, cool. So on the back of this, I'm using one of the fun things that substrates can do, which is iridescence. Like thin layer oil on top of things, stuff like that. It's really, really, really good at that. As well as I'm doing a clear coat, just a really simple clear coat on this material. And if I kind of wiggle through here, you'll see all that really subtle little scratches and detail and things like that. So that just lives in the clear. And then I have a broader roughness underneath. So this is like multiple specular loops, like one of the things that Substrate does. It's so great. Now, with it being production ready, it's a lot of people don't know this, but there is actually, I don't know what hotkey it was that got me there. Oh, I think it's 0. Yeah, cool. So we just teleported, like this is actually sitting out there in the ocean. This is a Substrate haul. It's in the example content. If you haven't downloaded this, get it. Example content's packed with super good stuff, very powerful things that you can rip apart and learn from. And if you fly down this haul for Substrate, it says this is because it's from 5.6. It says warning, it's experimental. It's actually production ready now. But if you fly down this, it does all these different things. So this shows you, well, problems with legacy materials is when you're trying to blend from metallic to non-metallic, you get that halo around the edge. It's ugly, it's nasty, right? It's because we're not able to layer multiple specs for real on top of each other when we're with a traditional material layering workflow. Substrate gets away from having to deal with stuff that looks like that with these weird, it looks like unpre-multiplied in a comp, but no, that's just because it's hard to stack different types of materials on top of each other. So one of the other things that Substrate does right off the bat is it converts legacy materials. It also has the ability to work in a blended mode. So that means that if you're on a high-end hardware, you can get all the beauty and all the stacking, so you can layer vertically as well as horizontally with slabs and Substrate. But if it's going to be on a small device or a mobile device, it has the ability to automatically kick back into a blended mode, which is going to be very, very performant and run on that hardware with basically no intervention from the end users. So other things that Substrate does that are great, we talked about that thin metal, that iridescence, it can stack multiple things vertically and horizontally. But, I'm going to slide down here because this one's got the iridescence on a clear coat. So like oil effects on glass. This is the iridescence that I have on the aircraft motor. So lots and lots of the haul just keeps going and going and going. I'm not going to spend the next 20 minutes flying by shader balls telling you how great they are. Download it, check it out. Be excited about it because it's super, super cool. I'm going to go ahead and just jump back over to this guy, and we will tweak this one material just a little bit. So we'll grab this, and if we kind of come down here and find that guy, here it is. All right. So this will demonstrate what the iridescence does really quickly. So basically what we have is we've got a thin layer, like the thickness layer, and you could texture map this, and this is going to adjust how it looks tarnished. Like when metal gets heated, that effect, like titanium that gets heated and it starts to go through that kind of that rainbow spectrum of colors, that's based on the thickness of the layer on the outside of it that happens from the heating. And that, if I start to play with this, you're going to see that it'll get all these different, really cool looks to it. And those are all like based on glancing angles, right? So as I move around this, let's get to one that pops a little bit more. Yeah, one like that. As I move around this, that color shift that happens in all that, that kind of spectrum that it goes through is because of that thin layer and that iridescence that, Substrate can do. So if you remember, we did the pearl, the opalescent one that was in the Rivian demo. Also things that Substrate can do that, just our traditional material system couldn't do. So we're pretty excited that you guys will have that as your default go-to for materials. So that's pretty much it for rendering. The next thing that we're going to talk about is trees, foliage. So I mentioned that PCG is I'm still just doing this thing. It's crazy. I mentioned that PCG is moved into production ready. And in this scene, I'm doing two things with PCG. So I've got PCG volumes that I'm using with the biome to generate rocks and grass, okay? And the PCG biome is really, really great. It gives you a lot of artist control, a lot of flexibility on it. It's part of the plugin, so if you download it, there's a plugin sample project. Make sure you download that also, because it'll give you something to rip apart and really look at. That's how I'm doing the main scattering in the scene, and then I have some exclusion volumes that are knocking out where the kind of riverbed is. Now, another thing that I'm doing with this is not using the volume-based biomes. I'm just using a standard PCG volume for this forest, and it's a pretty simple graph. I mean, if it's not terribly complex. Let's talk about the trees. So the trees, I've got this really big forest in my scene. Let's get rid of that stuff because it'll look a little bit better if we start to fly through this guy. When you're flying, if you use the middle mouse button, you can actually accelerate yourself. I don't know if you guys know that. I'm holding down the W key and I'm just scrolling up on my middle mouse button to kind of, tour this forest. So this is, you can see a little flashing. It is beta. These are the broadleaf trees. And what's really cool about this is there's literally billions of polygons, or the representation of what billions of polygons would be on screen right now. And the way we're doing that is with nanite foliage, right? So we can stop this playback. We don't need that anymore. So the way nanite foliage works is there's a few things. First of all, like opacity masks in nanite aren't, like, they work, but they're not the best, right? So you really want opaque stuff. You want true geometry. Now, if you have true geometry for a tree in a traditional workflow, you're going to be, taking up tons of disk space because there are like millions of polygons in each tree, and they're not going to be very performant, right? Like, it's just going to be really hard to work with that much data kind of coming in and coming out. Even with nanite, it's just not the best approach. So what we're doing with our tree workflow, like nanite foliage workflow, and there are some more talks that go more into depth. This is going to be like high-level marketing, because I'm a marketing guy, right? It's going to be kind of a high-level, like, these are the cliff notes of what the trees are about. So the way we're approaching it is we're doing them with assemblies. Essentially, you get a bunch of little skeletal meshes because world position offset also isn't going to be the best thing with nanite, right? So you end up basically having the core tree, and off of those core trees, you branch out these little assemblies, which are just little basic limbs, right? Like little limb, another little limb. You have a few of those. They go up a core shaft, kind of branch out, and end up creating a tree. Then the leaves on those limbs are also each individual little object. So it's kind of this kind of modular approach to making a tree. Now, by doing it in this modular way with these assemblies, basically what we're doing is saving a ton of disk space and a ton of compute power, and we're getting massive, massive density, right? Because it's just super, super cool. When you have all that density, then you run into problems with like distant objects. So we had to also approach that. So what we're doing is we're using a voxelized approach. So even though it looks like everything on here is actually a polygon, a lot of those pixels are actually just voxels. Once it gets down to one pixel, it turns into a voxel. Now, to overdrive that voxelization, I'm just going to use a little CVAR. I think I have it in here. I do. Boom. OK. So I've just made the voxels to visualize them 16 instead of 1, right? So that's what's going on, is the distance trees turn into voxels. Now, those voxels are smart enough to know what color they're supposed to be, how they're supposed to move. They're a one-to-one match to the geometry so that when you fly into them, they just turn into polygons. You don't feel it. You don't see it. There's no clipping. There's no authoring of LODs. It's just seamless, massive forests. And the end result is really, really cool. Now, I think if I fly around with them at 16, it's going to look really, really weird. But you will see them kind of drop back down into polygons if I just push this back to a value of 1. Boop. OK, there we go. So the trees that we're looking at are the broadleaf trees. So there's going to be trees that are available. There's a plugin. So if you download, or if you don't have to download it, it's already there. If you install the procedural vegetation tool, it's going to have some sample trees inside of there. There's also going to be trees on Fab. So also worth mentioning, Fab is now in the launcher. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. I think it happened just recently, like last week or the week before, was Fab in the launcher, which is a silly thing, but it's actually really great. And it can launch to other things other than Unreal. So it can go out to DCC, it can go out to Unity, it can go out to whatever you want. So Fab's in the launcher, which is kind of cool. So there's going to be more trees that are coming. And the tree workflow will continue to expand. Like, this is just our first drop. Trees are a big deal. We've been putting a lot of effort into them. We showed it in 5.6 with the Witcher content. That's basically taking that tech demo and getting it into your hands early. And it's going to continue to mature, as well as more and more tree species and things like that will come out. Now, let me show you one thing that's also, here, we'll just fly around our scene just a little bit more, just because it's so fun. Yeah, so trees are cool. You know, you drop down into the forest, it's just PCG scattering stuff everywhere. And that's basically what I came up with for the trees. And if you look in the plugins directory, after you've installed it, there is an actual series of sample assets. So in the sample assets, there are sample trees. So if you look at there's four broadleaf trees that it kind of ships with. So, you know, these are the little assemblies. These are the individual skeletal meshes for each one of these sub pieces, right? And then inside of those guys, there's also then going to be more instances for all the leaves, all the twigs, all the branches, all that stuff goes into this modular assembled tree, right? So that's great. You have all these little components. How the heck do you work with that, right? Like, well, there's actually a graph that helps you do that. And the graph, funny enough, underneath it all is based off PCG. It's been turned into a tool, and it's a good example of the types of tools that you could build with PCG yourself. But the graph editor for the tree system gives you a high-level control system to start to make slight changes or variants of the predefined trees that we're giving you. So let's check that out in action. And to do that, I'm actually going to jump out of this level and into a sample level that it ships with. So if we go into maps and we bring up this guy, and I don't want to save. It actually takes too long to save. We'll open this level. Yeah, that was good. Fast. OK, cool. So what do we have here? Well, we've got our 4 species of trees. And it's important to understand that the trees have an idea of health. They have an idea of age, like, you know, saplings up to mature trees. And they also have an idea of season. So all that's kind of baked into the model for nanite foliage. So we've got these 4 different varieties of trees, right? Pretty straightforward. And then over here, it comes with these little scatter, really simple little, you know, PCG graphs that basically scatter these guys. And you can see that they're kind of blowing in the wind, right? Because they're tied into our control system right here. So if I increase this wind speed up, I don't even know what a good range is. Yeah, there they go. They're going nuts. Now, health is the opposite of what you would think. So a healthy tree is a 10, right? And an unhealthy tree, you can actually go into the negative number. So if we start to change that to, like, I don't know, -5, you know, the trees aren't quite as happy. They don't look as healthy. And then obviously, if we go back up to 10 on that guy, and then the season, you know, you can kind of roll through this, and they'll change colors and you know, become autumn trees or things like that. So all of that is built into nanite trees. And again, like, all that really is, that's skeletal deformation. It looks so much better than like just standard world position offset. So the way the trees are moved is very authored and curated to look realistic. Super, super cool workflow. And like I said, there is a much more in-depth tree presentation. If you guys have time, I highly recommend checking that out. So the last thing I want to talk about is that PCG graph. And I just grabbed one out for the, which tree did I grab? I'm not even sure which one I grabbed. Yeah. So the way this works is, for each of these trees, you know, you can go in and you can basically say, all right, there's carves. So these can be positive or negatives. So this one's from the bottom. Let's actually do, the tallest one. We'll do the number 1 tree. OK, there's a tall tree. All right, so the first one is length from root. So if we give this a value of, like, oops, that's a little high. 0. It's a little low. It starts to trim it from the top, right? Now, you could trim from the bottom, so you could put another carve in there. Let's just put this one back up to, like, I don't know, 0.2 we'll trim from the top. And I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to just create a new carve, and we'll wire this in. And on this one, we're going to do it from the bottom. And we're going to basically make the tree shorter, right? So we'll just do something like 0.3 on this. So it's a standard tree, right? But I still have the ability to do subtractive operations to it. Currently, it's only subtractive. Eventually, it'll be more robust. But right now, there's just carves. Now, there's also then, like, let's get this guy back to being a tall tree. Let's not trim it off. But you've got gravity. You've got a direction for the gravity. So you do something like that, it turns into like a weeping willow looking tree. There's obviously scale. So lots of stuff that you can play around with. And then after you get the basic tree going, you jump into the palette. And the palette is where you go in and you select what branches you want to be. So off of that, kind of branching system that's kind of growing out, then you go in and you start to assign your assemblies to them, your little sub-assemblies, those skeletal meshes for the limbs of the trees. I want dead tree. I don't want leaves on my tree. I just want branches. Well, then assign, some in the palette, just branches, things without leaves. So that's sort of the PCG or the procedural vegetation tool, which underneath it all, technically is using PCG tech, right? So that's just an example of like a packaged up tool made with that stuff. Okay, cool. So I guess now it's time to talk about animation a little bit. And we'll go back into our scene to do that. So, I don't want to quit. I just want to open a new level. Back to my favorite. Get rid of that dude. All right, so hey, look at my little drones. Yay. I had so much fun with these drones. All right, so we're going to do this in the daytime. So we'll get rid of the night fog, and let's talk about animation. So you see this little guy over here. What's this little guy doing? He's just hanging out, and he has a procedural animation on him. So this is done with local motion. We've been showing this a couple of times. There was a few things that local motion did that were really limiting. A, it always tried to go to the origin. That was like, I'm going to the origin. It was just, that's what it wanted to do, right? So we fixed that in 5.7, so that makes it a whole lot more usable. And B, it was hard to get it to teleport to a very, start at a very specific spot. It was like very hardwired, kind of this notion of the origin. Both of those things have been addressed in 5.7. And this little guy is actually set up with a bunch of procedural movement, a very complex idle cycle on him. So he does all kinds of fun little stuff while he's idling. And the great thing about using the local motion system is you can use it for cinematic animation, or you can use it for runtime animation. And if you think of it as in cinematic animation, it's almost like it's just a procedural machine that's feeding data. It's very similar to motion capture in that sense that it's running on tick, it's outputting dense data, and you can bake that into a sequence if you want to, and then do cinematic linear workflows with it, right? Or you could reverse solve it onto a control rig, because everything's based, well, not everything, but you can base, this character is based on control rig. You can base your characters on control rig. You could layer control rig physics on top of them if you wanted to. You can do all kinds of really cool stuff, and then you could basically use procedural animation for part of it, bake it onto a control rig, and then have a hero animator come back and do some polish or some crazy moves on top of that baked data. This guy right now is actually set up to show sort of a runtime aspect of this. So if we go into play, hopefully it works. It should work. Yeah, there he is. Check him out. He starts running away. He's actually not running away. He's my companion. So he just wants to be where I am. Wherever I go, he's going to be like, all right, let's go. I'll follow you. And look, if I go up here and then turn around, he's like, yo, wait, I'm coming, dude. Yeah, so he's funny. And he kind of just runs around and does his thing. And this is just an example of using that local motion system in sort of a runtime scenario. He'll get to me, and then he'll just kind of pause and do his little weird idle stuff. He puts his antennas up and goes into communication mode. And all this character, if you look at it, it's all rigged using control rig. So there's like all these little. I can't really zoom in on him here. If I actually get out of this, he's still going to do his little loop. He'll still be doing his. Where are you, dude? Oh, hold on. You're over here. Yeah, so as you can see, as he does his little movements here, all these little pistons are hooked up using control rig modulars. The control rig modulars are great. So, all these little mechanical bits and things like that, that's all just hooked up in control rig, which is really pretty awesome. Now, the other way of dealing with this is to do, like a non-runtime version, like a sequenced version. So let's check that out. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a sequence. And let's escape out of this guy. Let's just load up the sequence by double-clicking on it. And all right, so if I hit play on this, it's going to be this guy over here. So he's going to, he's doing his stuff. He's going to kind of walk forward, and he's just running through these keyframes that we set on the location in the pelvis. So we just animated a few of the bits on that. And he's got, again, this, this really kind of complex little idle stuff that he'll do. And he's just kind of running around there. Now, here's the thing that's really fun, right? Like if I stop this, he can step over that rock because it had collisions turned on. If we stop the animation and I go grab the locator for that guy and start to translate that, he'll try to, he'll try to get to that point, right? Like that's nothing that's it's just a straight goal that he's trying to achieve. And all we did is animate that goal back and forth. So you can use it, again, for both cinematic workflow. Look at the drones. The drones have an avoidance. They have collisions turned on. That's kind of funny. They went right through his leg. That's great. You can do cinematics with it as well as do runtime stuff. That's the key. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is more kind of robot stuff. Since we're talking about animation and robots, I'm going to bring in one more guy and talk about a new improvement we've made for animators. So we'll bring in the basic control rig version of this. So on this guy, we've got this control rig. And if we display the control rig, it's pretty standard stuff. So my friend Chase actually set this guy up for me. So he's got, you can see all those little bits and bobs doing their thing. And the thing that's kind of interesting about this is we now have selection sets. So to create a selection set, you just open the selection set editor, and then you can go through and you could grab something. Like I could grab like the right foot. And if I know I always want to pick that right foot, I could just say, create a selection set for me of that right foot. Another thing that you can do with it that's really pretty interesting is, let's grab this guy right here. There we are. Yeah, okay, I got a foot. Cool. So we're going to create a selection set for that guy. So we'll say set, and we'll call this, I don't know, this is foot. I think it's the right foot. I think it was red, right? So it creates a selection set for me. Now, what does a selection set do? Well, it lets you select stuff, right? So if I click on it, it immediately selects that. Now, if I had multiple things selected when I made a selection set, it would create a selection set of the set of objects. Pretty straightforward. The other thing that it does that's really nice is if, as you start to go out and build these quick pick points, right? For an animator, bam, I want to grab this thing, that thing. It's so much faster if you've got just a little simple UI for doing that. That's what selection sets is going to give you. And if we go ahead and say right click on this guy, I can just tell it to create a mirror for it. So it's going to automatically go through and make one for my left foot. So I got a selection set for my right foot, a selection set for my left foot. Of course, you could dock that where you want it. So simple little thing, but it makes working so much easier inside of Unreal. Another new thing, it's Control S. Like if you have an object selected and you hit Control S, it saves it now. It's a little thing. I'm telling you, you're going to be like, Daryl told me this is good. I didn't believe him. He oversold that Control S. It makes it Control S is like my favorite thing in 5.7. It's just so much better. Okay. Last thing we're going to talk about is improvements we've made to the retargeter. So what we've got here is a couple of things. So there's lots of new ops that you can do with the retargeter that you can add onto them. So in the pelvis op, what we've got is we've got the ability now to adjust if we turn on the debugger, you can see the pelvis offset. So right now, this Mixamo character has a pelvis offset that's down here around, that's where the bottom of the hips are. That's what you want to use this pelvis offset to define. And the reason you want to do that is because it helps when things start to crash through the ground. So we're going to look at some breakdancing in just a second on this character that's recaptured from, the little Mixamo girl onto this, slightly heavier air. He's a pilot, or he drives a mech. He does something. He's got the cool outfit on. But his proportions are drastically different than this little kind of mannequin, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give that pelvis offset a little bit of a drop so that it kind of gets to right around there. That's a pretty good value for that guy. So with that done, now if we go into the mocap breakdancing, we've got this guy, he's rocking it out. And if we were to wait for him to go back here, we'll go back to this ground. When he's on that ground right there, this is the effect that's doing, is it really lets you push it so that it doesn't pass through the ground. That pelvis offset gives you the ability to compensate for that and have him not pass through the ground. Now, we've also added in the ability to take the hands and give them a contact point on the ground, so you can raise the hands and the feet up so that they don't pass through the ground. So a couple of little things that are really, really helpful for that. Now, the final thing that we're going to look at is this Macarena dance, because why not Macarena dance? And what this is I'm going to turn it off. Ooh, that's not the Macarena dance. Here, let's do this. We're going to turn off the body, goal, and intersect first. Let's go. We got the guy doing his thing. And because he is not the right proportions, you see all kinds of problems with his dance. It doesn't work, right? So what we've done is we've actually added the rigid body solver into it. So that sort of the physics, like that octopus that I showed in 5.6, that same idea where we're basically using the physics to overdrive the goal. So we just turn it on. You can see he's now going to use his capsules as collisions that do a really good job of just keeping him outside of his bounds. So in the metahuman, he is a metahuman, and that's a metahuman outfit, by the way, that came off of Fab. And it just adapted to his size perfectly, which is awesome. That metahuman has capsules built into it. Now, the capsules that come from the metahuman have squares for the hands and the feet. Currently, you need to use like actual capsules. So that's going to be changed eventually, but for today, if you were to grab a metahuman, just make sure that you switch the hands and the feet over to capsules. And you can turn on the debug mode. All these little debug things are great, but you can see there are his little capsules. Those are the volumes that he's trying to stay outside of. So that is basically what I wanted to talk to you guys about in a nutshell. We talked about Substrate being production ready and on by default. MegaLights, some awesome improvements into that. It moves into beta. We looked at the foliage workflow and how we're handling massive forests and doing really amazing things with both the assembly workflow as well as a voxelized rendering fallback for when those turn into like basically pixel-sized polygons. We talked about some world creation stuff and PCG moving into production ready. And of course, we finished off with some animation and some local motion stuff. So thanks again for your time, everybody. I will be out on the demo pods, and yeah, come hang out and ask us questions, and we'd love to show you more cool stuff inside of Unreal. Enjoy Fest, everyone.